Yo, it's Herman here, and I've been in your exact spot right now wondering why the f I take so long to edit videos. So I'm gonna share with you 10 tips that have shaved away from my editing time, and none of it has to do with getting like a faster computer or more RAM or anything like that. They're practices and habits that anyone can develop and edit way more efficiently and avoid any problems that bottleneck your creative process. Now, most of these are organization tips, but it's by keeping organized that I've been finding myself running into fewer problems and causing less frustrations. This video should actually be called 10 tips on how to avoid a migraine in Premiere Pro, but it doesn't exactly sound as nice. So get a pen or paper or open up a document to take some notes because we're just gonna jump right into tip number 1. Now, if your project file looks like this, you're gonna wanna apply this tip right away. Tip number 1 is to use bins in Premiere Pro to organize your files. Not only should you be naming your bins, but you should also number them in the order that you'd like them to appear as well. Here's how I like to create my bins. First one, I put current cuts, which includes the sequence that I am currently working on. Number 2, I put archive cuts, which includes all the sequences of my previous cuts in case I need to go back to them. Number 3, I put footage, which is where I keep all my footage, and I'll make new bins if they're shot from different cameras. Number 4 is sound, where I'll keep my audio files, so things like sound effects and music tracks, and they have their own sub bins as well, so I don't mistake my music tracks for sound effects or anything like that. And number 5 is VFX, where I'll be importing my VFX shots into. And from here, I'll create new bins as necessary for the project that I'm working on. And I know when you're first starting out, this can seem like a chore and contradicts saving time, but imagine that your client asks you to make changes to your videos and then having to look for a specific file or variation of that file to replace. Instead of rummaging around like a raccoon through your project panel or trying to reveal that file every time, just keep it organized, and that's the key to not bashing your head into your computer. Also, the next tip will save you from having to make these bins every time you start a new project. Tip number 2 is to create a project template for yourself. So after you've made all your lovely bins in a fresh project, rename it to something like Premiere Pro project template and just copy and paste that project file to every new project folder that you make, and always start your new projects from there. Tip number 3 is to rename your files. Just like how you should rename the bins you make to keep things organized, you should also be renaming the files that you import if they're like 73 characters long. That way you can also use the search bar up top on the project panel to look for it. I don't mean that you should be doing this for every file that you import, but get into the habit of renaming bins, sequences, nests, or graphics that you import. Tip number 4 is to make new sequences for different purposes. And what I mean is, don't do your entire edit from start to finish in one sequence and that's it. Because even if you save multiple project files, it's way tougher to make changes or refer back to previous editing decisions if you only use one sequence. Guys, you can only Control Z so many times. What I personally do is create a sequence called best pieces, where I'll be selecting the best moments of my footage and plan to use for my cut. And then once I do that, I'll duplicate it and call it cut number 1, where I'll begin my rough cut. That way, if it hits the fan during my edit, I can still copy clips from my best pieces sequence instead of going back to the footage file and then looking for that moment. After any major changes to my cut or my first export, I make a copy of that sequence and rename it to something like cut number 2 and then go from there. So if this cut turns out garbage, I can easily go back to cut number 1. A quick tip within this tip: if you don't want to make a new sequence every time to start with, use tip number 2, where you create a project template for yourself. So instead of creating a best pieces or a cut number 1 sequence every time, just make it once along with your beautifully organized bins and then save it as a template to always start your new projects from there. Now, have you ever found yourself opening the project panel and you're thinking, wow, I don't need to see all this stuff? The way you can keep it looking clean and only show the information important to you is by customizing the metadata display. All you have to do is just uncheck all the things you don't care about and then check the ones you do care about and save it as a custom metadata display, and then the project panel will never be an eyesore again. I personally like to keep a comments tab for myself to make little notes about the specific cut that I am working on. Tip number 6 is a way for you to label a group of clips or make a note on your timeline. Now, without anything selected on your timeline, hit the shortcut M and you'll create a marker. Hitting M again will bring you this window where you can change the color of your marker, add notes to it, and also set the duration of the marker. Instead of typing in the numbers here, you can also hold the Alt key down and then drag out the markers to extend the duration. That way you can actually see the notes that you left for yourself. What's great about these is that you can also jump straight to your markers by hitting Shift M, easily jumping to a new scene or chapter of your video that you're working on. I usually use them to divide up sections of my video or add notes to categorize my clips. Tip number 7 is to color label your clips. All you have to do is right click your clip, go to label, and then change it to another color. By doing this to your clip or multiple clips, it becomes easier to differentiate them. For example, all these may be video clips, but I want to highlight the ones that I imported where I did some VFX on. That way I know that all the ones in the same color are VFX shots when I'm just looking straight at the timeline. You could do this to, categorize your stock footage from your footage that you shot or sound effects from music tracks. Not only does it save you from guessing what things are, it makes your timeline look a little more dope than just these blue and green blocks. Tip number 8 is to create presets for yourself. Just like tip number 2, where you create a project template for yourself, presets are properties that you save that can be applied again later so you don't have to do it again from scratch. For example, let's say that I'm always filming this talking headshot at this location using the same camera and the lighting, but I don't want to color grade each clip every time that I shot here. By highlighting the effects, right-clicking them, and then saving it to a preset, I can find it again by going to the effects panel and looking under the presets bin. All I have to do is drag it over to my clip and these same effects will be applied. Now the same thing can be done with audio effects. That way when I'm using the same microphone like this, I don't have to apply a new EQ and then mess around with that. Tip number 9 is to customize your keyboard shortcuts. Now you may already know a lot of keyboard shortcuts in Premiere Pro, or you might only know a few. Either way, customizing your shortcuts is a way that has made my life easier. For example, I added the B key to delete things instead of having to only go to the delete key. That way, if I want to delete things, which is pretty often, I don't have to lift up my left hand and then move it all the way over to the other side of the keyboard to hit delete, or lift my right hand from my mouse to do it. The B key is closer to where my left hand will be most of the time. Get it? Because we're talking about the B key? Yeah, I know, not funny. To customize your keyboard shortcuts, you just have to go to the edit button on the top toolbar, go to keyboard shortcuts, look for the command that you want to change, and then add your new shortcut. You can even save all your new shortcuts into a keyboard layout preset in case you want to change it back to the default if someone else is using your computer, and then you just load up your own shortcuts when you're back on it. Now, the last tip that I have for you is one that I've been using recently, and it's been a lifesaver. That is to use proxies. Proxies are essentially lower quality and smaller copies of your raw footage that you can use to edit instead of the raw footage itself. The reason you want to do this is because larger video files or certain file formats can give Premiere a hard time to work with and then make the editing process sluggish. So if you drop like 8K footage into your timeline and the fans of your computer start to sound like a lawnmower, it won't be playing back in real time and it'll just be stuttering every other frame, and it's just disgusting. Now, it might be a bit over dramatic here, but realistically, you can use this workflow for 4K footage, or if you're editing on a slower computer or laptop. All you have to do is highlight the clips that you want to create proxies for, right click, go to proxy, and click create proxies. You can change the format and preset and also set the destination of where you want the proxy files to be. I like to have it at QuickTime and ProRes high resolution, and it'll just open up Adobe Media Encoder and start creating your proxies for you. Once it's done, it'll automatically be attached to your original footage. Just make sure that you toggle the proxy button and it's actually highlighted so it can actually play your proxy while you edit. If you don't see the button, then click the plus icon to bring up the button editor and drag the toggle proxy button over. Oh, and don't worry, when you export your video, it'll export with the original footage unless you have the use proxies box checked. Boom, 10 ways for you to edit more efficiently in Premiere Pro and start hitting your deadlines instead of making excuses for yourself. Totally not projecting. Hopefully you find these tips useful, and let me know in the comments below which tip was your favorite. If you learned something today, give the video a thumbs up and share it with a friend so more people can apply these tips to their workflow. And hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. It's the only way to know that I should keep making videos on my own channel. And if for any reason I quit, the best way to stay updated is by following my Instagram account. The handle is @CoffeeLicker. So until the next video, my name is Herman, and I never know how to end these without saying the same line. So we're just gonna awkwardly wave goodbye like this. Is that how you wave? Man, when you're on camera, it's like you forget how to do natural things like wave.